We go. All right, Freddie Wilson, sir, welcome back to the show. I am excited for
Great
you
to
to
be
be
back.
here. Yeah, man. So, for those of you listeners who don't know Freddie is the creator and host of a podcast called Unforgotten, the untold story of, I'm going to mess this up, Matt Stewart, Unsolved Murder. It's a long title.
Murder of Matt Stewart. Yeah, no, you were pretty much right.
Yeah, I'm mostly right. But anyway,
I
go
didn't even
check,
Google
stop
that.
now. Go check out Freddie's podcast. You're going to love it. It's going to pull you in hook, line, and sinker. If you have listened to it, Freddie just had a new episode come out yesterday where he answers some Q&A stuff because it's been about a year. It's been a year, right, since the podcast?
Almost a year. I think it was like the beginning of November was the last
Okay.
episode.
Yeah, like November
Yeah.
2nd or something like that, I think maybe.
Yeah. So coming towards a full year.
So stop now, listen to it because we're going to go over some of that stuff, and I don't want any spoiler alerts. And then Freddie does jump into some really good, exciting news for things to come in the future, which is great. So I want to jump right into just some questions as I was listening to the podcast yesterday in your most recent show. I made an observation to myself, and I could be totally wrong, but one of the
Yeah.
things that I noticed about that interview, that Q&A that you had versus when you came onto my show and the other Q&As that you have, it's almost like there's a different tone to you at this moment when you're talking about this stuff. And I don't mean it in a negative way. Previously during the show, you're a bit more guarded with information. Not that you're giving more information or exposing people's names or whatnot, but it was almost like you are coming from more of a place of not determination, but you're not as coy or you're more direct in some of your answers and just your tone and just your answers. And I thought that was good. And I just wondered, have you felt yourself that way? Do you feel yourself being more, not empowered, but more, maybe giving less of a shit? How about that?
Yeah, well, that's interesting you bring it up. I don't know if I thought about changing the approach or my demeanor or attitude as I was doing that Q&A, but I think it was definitely feels like a different place. I kind of got to a point, and I talk about it in the Q&A episode, that at this point, I can't see moving forward with a third season. I told a lot of people after the second season I was done, and took all of about a week before I was following up on leads and, just kind of got sucked back into it. And I eventually got to the point where I realized that, I hit so many dead ends that I got to the point where I knew it wasn't going to continue on, unless there's something big that happens. So I got into this headspace that I don't want to walk away from this. This situation has been so mired in secrecy and silence, and I don't want to contribute to that. I don't want to walk away from this having held on to, what could be pivotal information. And so I kind of wanted that Q&A to be getting things a little bit out on the table that were brought up in the podcast, whether they relate to the murder or not. There's you could probably write a book about all of the rabbit trails that I went down that probably have absolutely nothing to do with the murder, that many of them were like intriguing. And I don't know if it's my personality or if they were especially intriguing, but I just would more been in the headspace that I want to get things out on the table before I just, I'm not going to forget about it. I'm going to continue to push the story and get Matt's story out there, but not in the same way that I had been doing. So I don't know if that
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think I picked up on that. So good for you. One of the things back in the first of the year, when we could get around family and friends, folks would bring up your podcast often. And I would see folks in the restaurant and they're like, hey, that was a good episode with Freddie and we love it and we listen to it. We had no idea. But one of the avid listeners that I talked to they sent me the screenshots from Facebook. It was on a thread that someone had sent her or whatnot. So I won't dive into that part of it because I want folks to listen to your Q&A. But when you read, when did you find out that Hannah had said those things or put that out there on social media?
I believe it was pretty shortly after she posted it. I'd started getting text messages from people with screenshots of of what she posted. Of course, we're not Facebook friends anymore.
Right.
But yeah, so I figured I can't say that I was surprised. I was a little surprised at the timing because I had just ended the podcast.
Right.
So I didn't really know like what exactly they wanted me to do. Like it was weird in that sense. I knew how she felt about it because I'd had, conversations. I mean, she called my job. She found out where I worked and called my boss and tried to, I guess, get me in trouble for doing did I not talk about, maybe I didn't talk about that last time.
No. Or if you did, I only have like an 8 gig memory. So things.
Yeah. Well, no, that's okay. I probably didn't. I mean, it's not because it doesn't relate to the case at all. It's just my experience doing it. Yeah. So, I mean, she had expressed to me and other people how she felt about it. And so I wasn't surprised in that sense. Some of the things that she said were definitely, like I talk about in the Q&A, just not true. And that was disappointing. But I knew that she had negative feelings towards me and the way that everything had gone down. And yeah, I guess it is what it is.
So you said that you're a little shocked, but how did it make you, like after the initial shock, like how did you feel? Were you pissed? Were you hurt? What emotions did you feel?
Probably a mix of emotions. I mean, on a real level, I feel bad. I feel, like I said in the Q&A, I mean, she has some legitimate reasons to be upset. I presented a podcast idea that ended up not being what I ultimately did. So she totally has a reason to be upset about that. And I recognize the position that she was put in, not purposefully by me, but I'm sure that she has family members that, were upset that she had participated, were upset that this had happened. And so, yeah, on a very sincere sense, I can't ever put myself in her shoes and the family shoes of what they've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
I know people that have been through similar things, but me myself, I can't really relate to that. So I want to extend, some grace and some understanding, but yes, definitely some. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little pissed at some of the things that she implied or said. Yeah. She implied that this was the idea that this shifted into a true crime podcast and that I'd be trying to figure out who killed Matt Stewart, that she was unaware of that is just not true. And like I go into share, some of our conversations interview that we did, where I explained to her the evolution of it, and she, responds and seems to understand. And then actually days before the first episode aired, she shared on her Facebook page the teaser trailer to the podcast. And it's probably been a while since people have seen that, but if you want to go back and look at that, I don't think that there's any way to have seen that and not understood that it would be it was called Unforgotten, the Unsolved Murder of Matt Stewart. So this whole idea that she was unaware until the first episode came out that this is what I would be doing is just not true. And I know of people looking through the comments. It was kind of a trip because you saw the thread. I don't know if your thread included some of the comments, but a lot of the people that were saying these terrible things about me were people that I knew, that I grew up with. And it was almost like a high school reunion, in a
It was a roast of Freddie.
with a twist. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that on the other hand, it's, I went into this knowing, and as I was doing it, continuously knowing that I was going to ruffle feathers. So I'm not trying to, portray myself as a victim or anything. That's not to say that it doesn't frustrate me. It doesn't anger
Sure.
me at some level. But I'd say the overwhelming feeling is just disappointment, and didn't make me happy.
Right.
That's for sure.
Um, During the Q&A session, there was a part in there that I paused and I listened to twice. And I'm going to paraphrase here because I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly. But you were speaking to her, I think, about the call log. And you had told her about the possible hostage situation going on with her little sister.
Mm-hmm.
And that she says something to the effect of her thoughts were it was from the inside. Because the guy, the killer had time and knew to pick up she says bullets, but I think she means gun case. Or I don't think they found all the bullets either.
Yeah. So in that moment, you got to think back. This was before the first episode aired, before I talked with a lot of the people I ended up talking with. So this was the first time I had heard anything like that. So I was like, I was very shocked when she was saying all that, and did not understand what she was saying. As time went on and I talked with more people, I've come to believe that what she meant to say, or was meaning, was instead of bullets was shell casings. But at the end of the day, I don't know. She said what she said.
Right.
And again, like in the interview, she said that she'd heard that from her grandmother, and not directly from police. So we don't know if it's true, but it was certainly interesting that she said that. And, as I talked with neighbors and other people, that seemed to be something that they had heard from police or from other people too. So it's not, I don't know anything for a fact, but it's definitely something that's out there.
So when she says it was someone from the inside, do you think she meant at the time as someone from inside the police, or does she mean someone inside of our family, our inner circle?
From that conversation and the context, and some of the things that were said after the recorder was turned off. So what happened was we had probably like an hour-long interview, if not more so, that ended basically with me explaining to her the evolution of the podcast and what I ended up, wanting to do. And then we ended the interview. And after we ended it, we kept talking about the murder and what she knew and what she had heard. And she started saying some things that I thought were interesting. And I said, I think I should probably turn this recorder on. And she said, okay. And I turned the recorder on, and then we kept talking. So it's probably some of what was said before and then what was said during that second recording. You probably missed some of it, but yeah, it was my understanding that she was saying that she had thought about, and she even mentioned other people in her family, speculating that perhaps it could have been someone involved in law enforcement that committed the murder, and that may have been the reason why it's been so long and nobody seems to have done anything.
There was a part where she was explaining or talking about it, and she seemed to kind of just let the conversation, she's flowing with the conversation. And I noticed it was after she kind of said something about the inside whatnot. Gosh, what was it? She kind of stopped. Her tone changed. She goes, "Is this recording? Is this recording right now?" It was almost like "Oh shit, I've said too much," or "I shouldn't say this." And that was right after, I think she said, maybe you said the people who were supposed to be finding the answers know, but won't, or something to that effect. And that's when she was like,
I was trying to, I know what you're talking about. I was starting a train of thought saying, it could be that the people that are supposed to be finding the answers are dragging their feet because they made a mistake and they might get in trouble. But as I was saying that, she completed the thought, and I said, I think that the people that are supposed to be finding the answers, and she said, know the answers.
Yes, that's it. Yep.
And then I said, I'm not sure, um, I didn't know exactly where she was going with that. But from that conversation, both parts of it that were recorded and parts of it that weren't, the idea of somebody that was related to Matt, not through blood but by marriage, that was in law enforcement, potentially being involved. That seemed to come up again with her, whereas it had come up in a previous interview I had already done with Matt's sister. So that's when I kind of started connecting dots, that there's some kind of theory here, or there's somebody thinks something about a specific person in law enforcement that's somehow related or connected with Matt.
Because that same family member, not blood, but by marriage, was he in the Mooresville Police Department and then was transferred or left? I can't remember.
So he, and I want to preface this by saying, I don't know if the guy that I found is who they were referring to.
Right.
I'm fairly confident that it's the guy that I interviewed in the podcast named Clay, who was worked in law enforcement in another county.
Okay.
He worked around that area at some point. Then he moved to somewhere in the state, but not in the area.
Yeah, I remember that episode now, and it was one of those where I was listening to it, and I almost felt like I was like, I believe this guy. From my patch of grass sitting there, I was like,
yeah, it was hard. It was hard for me. I was terrified calling. That was probably one of the more nerve-wracking calls that I made.
Sir, police officer, you don't know me, but just randomly, did you kill a family member?
That was essentially like, I knew that there was a family rift, and I knew that this person, had been, or I didn't know, but I was under the strong impression that this person had been thought of by other family members. So yeah, I was terrified, and he, in the interview, handled it with, I think, a lot of grace and humility, and
oh yeah,
seemed to be very transparent and very honest, and thanked me for what I was doing. I'm just a layperson. I'm not an investigator. I don't know if there's any kind of like coded language to what he said, but just in my personal opinion, I was, impressed that he took the time to be super transparent and honest with me. And, I think probably a lot of it just related to his physical likeness to the sketch.
Right.
Which is, a lot of people seem to fit that.
And plus there was no real motivation for him. Like there was no motive of.
Right. I mean, one of the things I didn't go into in the podcast, that I did spend an enormous amount of time researching, was that whole family, the dispute that happened. And I don't think I ever really announced this in the podcast or went into it too much, but it revolved around a will, a last will and testament of Matt's, not his grandfather by blood, but the person that married his grandmother. And there was a dispute about the legitimacy of a certain will as opposed to another will that was supposedly written.
Right.
And yeah, I dug into any kind of public record that I could find, and yeah, it just did not seem like something that would rise to that level of animosity. There was nothing that in the documents that mentioned Matt Stewart at all. So, I don't know all the details of it, but it was, I felt like there didn't seem to be like a clear connection between Matt's case and that. I think, but then again, I don't know all the details.
Right.
I'm limited in what I know because there's so many people closer to the situation that didn't want to talk. But
You know, you did mention that on there that, you know, you're not selling a book, you have no personal financial gain from this, which I've heard some people say, well, you know, he's doing it to get notoriety, to get rich or whatever. But if a network like Discovery ID Channel or
Yeah.
Netflix or who knows were to run with this thing, and do you have any sort of rights to the story? Do you have to your podcast? Could there be some sort of monetary value that you could gain down the road?
I think I would start the bidding at probably $5 million. I'm just kidding. No.
Yeah. If anybody out there that has a checkbook.
Oh my God, no. When Investigation Discovery, when the producer of that show called, I was like, let me give you everything that I have and put your name on it. Like, yeah, I no, I don't have any right. I don't even know how you like, I don't even know how all of that works, but I certainly don't have any rights to the story and don't want rights to the story. My whole thing from the beginning is I want somebody else to do it.
Right.
And that's still the case. So yeah, I'm not looking to capitalize off of a situation like this ever. I just want, you know, truth to come out, and I just happen to believe. And you know, I think there's some significant disagreements. Other people don't believe it would help, but from the research that I've done, people I've talked to, I believe that getting the story out um, gives can provide great opportunities to connect dots, to put pressure on people that may know more, to get it out to a wider audience of experts that can, you know, call in um, and offer their services. There's so many good things that can happen from increased exposure, especially for a case that has, you know, from the public's perspective, is pretty much laying dormant for 11 years. So that's what I want to see. It's certainly not, like I said in the Q&A, to get rich. I've spent a lot of money, a couple $1,000s. I've offered folks that want to help kind of recoup some of the costs, and people, listeners, especially friends of Matt and family members, not immediate family members, but other people have donated. It's certainly not offset. You know, it hasn't come close to offsetting the cost, but it's certainly helped. And yeah, but I'm good. I'm going to continue to pay to keep the podcast on there forever.
Oh, well, I think it's important that I'm glad that you answered it. But the question, you know, I think it's important that people realize that you're doing it for the right reasons, and it's not a monetary gain. You're just someone genuinely who wants to get the story out there, to get a resolution, you know, to find out, you know, because there's a killer on the loose. And what people always come up to me when they talk about it, and I go, why would the family not want you to continue? Why would they want you to stop? And I don't ever really have a good answer. And I don't know have you ever gotten a good answer, or in your gut, do you have a feeling of why they would want you to stop when they ask you to?
You know, I've gotten answers. I don't know if they, you know, I guess good is kind of a subjective term. You know, I don't know if there would, you know, it was expressed to me by multiple people in the family that I was putting them in danger by talking about it openly, or talking about the things that I was talking about. I was never given exact details for what exact things that I said or implied that put them in danger, who they were in danger from, you know, if they've identified who this person is, or a group of people, or whatever. So that was something that was said. The idea of bringing up bad memories, and them.
Now, the bad memories part, I could understand. I can understand the emotional pain. Well, I can imagine. I haven't had a family member murdered, but that part, you know, wanting it to go away. You know, if it goes away, it doesn't exist because I don't want to feel the pain. But then there's the part that you want to find this person, get them off the street, because this could happen to another family. also, didn't the mother-in-law, and we talked about this when you were on the show last time, but she had a phone call with you and told you like, hey, don't worry, you're not in danger. He's not going to come after you, or something to that effect.
No,
And
well, she said the opposite. She said, essentially, she had called before, and we had a conversation, if you can call it that. But she, like other people in the family, had claimed that I was putting them in danger. I was, putting all of them in danger for what I was doing. And I was expressing to her, I was reiterating what she had said. I said something along the lines of, I understand that you all think that I'm, putting people in danger. And she interrupted me and said, no, it's not us that's in danger. He's still out there, and you better watch your back. Something to the effect of that. It was, you better watch your back was something that I remember verbatim.
But that would mean that she would have an idea, possibly, of who it is.
Yeah.
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 So
I was completely floored by. I didn't know how to respond to that. And she had said other things. One of the other things she had said in the previous call was, and don't think that the person that did this isn't listening to your podcast, because they are. And I thought to myself, how would you possibly know that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like I think I said in either the podcast or the Q&A, whenever I heard anything that seemed significant like that, I immediately passed it off to law enforcement. So I can't speak to the intentions or the meaning behind that. But I felt it was important to share with people because, I feel, and this is a reason why I included a lot of stuff that maybe made people feel uncomfortable, or they, didn't necessarily want shared, when I'm doing a story like this. And like I said, I've offered people the opportunity to help me pay for it. I feel a obligation when someone says something like that to me and I'm supposed to be investigating this story. I can't not say anything to the audience. Like I said,
well, I mean, that's a pretty big,
right. I mean,
important to the story.
Other people and her knowingly said some of these things to me, and I just felt an obligation that I had to let people know what was said. I can't, again, I can't claim to speak for her and what she meant by it. And in my mind, I was thinking to myself, how would you know that? It just seems so presumptive. Even calling the person he.
True.
Supposedly, you would think that if we don't know who it is, we don't know the gender of the person either.
And it could easily be a them because there was a knife and a gun involved.
Right. Yeah. Two people. So it was that was a really weird experience.
Yeah, and the questions those are good questions to have. How do you know? How would you know that? What do you feel? Have you ever felt in danger? Do you currently feel in danger?
I think at that moment I kind of was just shocked, and I didn't really know how to process it. I'd never had someone I perceived it as a threat. The way that it was said and the context, that it was said in, I don't know if it was meant to be perceived that way, but yeah. So I think in that moment and probably the days after that, I was on edge.
Yeah.
But I think if anyone, whoever did this has gotten away with it for 11 years.
11 years.
I think going after me would be a pretty dumb strategy for, maintaining the course.
Right.
But yeah, I, knew throughout doing what I was doing that there was always a possibility. And obviously people told me and, tried to stop me using that potential. But I just felt like it was too important. Either that, or I don't know, my own curiosity got the best of me.
No, I think it was important to share. I mean, it's, it's like you said, could be interpreted as a threat. Let law enforcement decide that and whatnot. But speaking of using your own kind of discretion and things to add to the podcast that you kept out, kudos to you, man, for having the discipline not to put into the podcast about the resurrection part. Because that is I won't say it's a very interesting part that I had no idea about. And, I've received a few text messages and had a couple conversations just since yesterday about that part specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that there were modern day resurrections. I didn't realize, and, I'm not bashing anybody, not bashing anyone's beliefs, believe what you want. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not passing judgment. And if I lost, like they give the example of the 2-year-old, if one of my children, I would do anything in my power to get them back, obviously.
Yeah.
But that was a bit odd. And people who listen to the show always had the impression or thought I hate to say this, but I'm just going to say it. The church may have been a little not
Yeah.
normal, or they had got a feeling that it was a little just not your traditional church. Maybe
Yeah.
a little culty. I don't know if culty is a word. But I just used it.
Yeah.
So
Accept it.
when they heard this part about them trying to resurrect him,
Mm-hmm.
that was like, yep, that is just odd. And I don't even know if the church is still existing in down there. No idea.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely still around. Yeah, I grappled with originally the whole concept of the podcast, like I talked about in the Q&A, was so much different. And originally, I was going to talk about more about the church and that whole aspect of it, not just the raising him from the dead, but the idea that the church was kind of in a self-proclaimed revival at that point for about a year leading up to. So I had a lot of my interviews early on with the pastors of the church were about this revival that had been going on, where people were, according to them, being healed miraculously. They had a healing room that they set up where people would come in and get faith healings, and people were supposedly healed of cancer and all sorts of things. People were spending hours on the floor, and I was going to dive into that and the belief system of the church a little bit more. Like you said, not to bash anyone for their beliefs, but just to kind of show, to tell the story and let people kind of find out for themselves as I got. And that was going to coincide with what I wanted to do with telling the story of people going through this experience. The pastors, Hannah, and as really everything changed when I had the conversation with Matt's sister Mandy, and we had that weird interaction where I asked if there was anyone she thought of. That's really when I would say I decided it was truly going to be a true crime podcast solely. But I think looking back, there's so many people, and I know there are some listeners that listen to the Q&A and had no idea. There's a lot of people in the Mooresville community that know that aspect of the story, that whether I should have been, I think to not on the one hand, there is the fear of not wanting to other people, and like you were saying before, in the midst of a tragedy, people are going to react emotionally. But looking back, like you just said, there's a suspicion, and I think that, like I put in the Q&A, examples of other congregations that they're kind of in line with, that they would maybe identify with, that act in similar ways. And I think in that context, it allows people to see that if you take a wider view, what may have looked suspicious in proximity to the murder is really just how they act on a regular basis. I mean, obviously, an extenuating circumstance. It was,
Yeah.
something that doesn't normally happen, but it kind of, showing Bethel and some of the other congregations that they're kind of in league with in their beliefs, you kind of begin to see it's certainly interesting, but it wasn't necessarily a reaction to Matt's murder. It was just kind of the way that they are.
Well, I think it was actually, I thought after listening to it, it was a good thing that you didn't do it because it would have distracted from the story.
Yeah.
Would it had people talking about it because it's not something that other people do or maybe practice in their faith, or they have friends that do, whatever, it's just not the norm. I would say whatever the norm is, it's 2020, anything's normal. So, so I was actually glad that you didn't put it in there because it didn't really have, like you said, didn't have anything to do with his murder. And it could also have people shine a negative light, how people interpret how the church practices and their belief
Right.
system. So,
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know. I can't speak for River Life. I'm not a part of River Life. I was never a part of River Life, but I certainly had relationships and still do, I guess, to some extent with folks that are there. I don't even know if they would. They're pretty open about their beliefs, and I don't know if they would have had any objections to me talking about that. They may not have. They're I think confident in the way that they practice and who they are. So yeah, looking back, I guess maybe it was probably overall it was best I kept it out, but I thought in the Q&A kind of trying to help people understand where they're coming from and that it's not just them that have these kind of beliefs and theology, that they're part of a much larger movement than people probably realize, that how prevalent this kind of strand of congregations are.
Yeah, dude, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's definitely a fast growing movement within Christianity.
Well, for sure, if it does work, we're going to know about it. This will make the news.
I mean, I'm still waiting on the evidence, but yeah, more power to them. I mean, they're standing up for what they believe. They have their beliefs, and they're going after it.
So some of the good news I wanted you to touch on, what you did in the Q&A. Your podcast hasn't been picked up, but there's another crime kind of podcast that's going to do an episode about the story, correct?
Yeah. Well, actually, we can break this new good news
on
this podcast. There's two true crime podcasts now that have agreed to do an episode on Matt's murder. One is a already well-known true crime podcast that does different case each episode, and the other is one that is starting up around your area, actually, that is planning on doing an in-depth episode on Matt's murder. So I've helped them, provided all the information that they need, hopefully, and they know how to get in contact with me if they need more. And I think they're going to do some interviews with some people that I did interviews with, and maybe some more people too. It'll be awesome to see what they come up with. I don't know if they're ready for me to announce it yet, but once they are, I'll let you know. And it'd be cool if they came on your podcast too.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
after they do an episode on it. Theirs is not just about Matt's murder. It's a true crime. They're going to do all North Carolina cases, which I think is really cool. So yeah, I spent a lot of time talking with them. They're awesome.
Well, that's it. That is awesome. That's interesting because that segues into another question that popped into my mind that people ask me is, would you be interested in doing another one? And if so, people, in different pockets are like, oh, well, they've never solved this murder. Would Freddie be interested? I'm like, I don't think Freddie's really like a podcast true crime detective. I think he was attached to this one. It meant something to him. He knew the family. There was a connection. So therefore he's driven. a total stranger, I just don't see Freddie doing it because this is time consuming, labor intensive.
It has. Yeah. I've certainly thought about it.
Yeah.
And I uh, was interested in looking at a murder actually down here in Florida. I wanted to, if I was to do another one, I would want it to be a case that hadn't gotten any press,
Yeah.
like Matt's case. But the other criteria is that there has to be a family that would be willing to, that would actually want me to do it. I'm not doing what I did before.
Yeah.
It was just too stressful.
Oh, I
But
can't imagine. Jeez.
yeah, I think going through it all and kind of figuring out how to do it, I've definitely thought about how I could actually help people that want this,
Yep.
that maybe don't know how to do a podcast. So it's the thought has crossed my mind. I haven't made any like official plans or anything, but I've talked to some people and uh, thought about it, but I don't have anything currently in the works or anything like that.
Well, during the course of listening to your podcast, we kind of we got to know Matt a little bit of his story and the family members and people who came on to the show and talked a little bit. But the one thing that we don't know a whole lot about is about you, Freddie. So who is the man behind the phone here that I listen to? Now we can put a face to it, but could you tell, and obviously there could be somebody out there who wants to kill you. So you may not want to give away too much information about yourself, but whatever you're feeling comfortable with.
My biggest fears.
Yeah. What is your biggest fear?
All right. Well, I guess I did that to myself. What is my biggest fear? I don't know. It's a deep question.
You don't have to go to the deep end. You can stay in the shallow end. That's where I live.
Yeah, no, I guess, I don't know, disappointing loved ones.
Oh, it's a good one. That is a
Yeah.
huge fear. I think most people have that fear.
Yeah, I think it's probably a normal one.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any abnormal ones. Maybe dentists.
Yeah, you and my 4-year-old twins. What type of music do you like to listen to?
That's a good question. I grew up on punk rock, and middle school I got into Blink 182 and Green Day and all that kind of stuff, and wanted to play music, wanted my own band, but nobody wanted to play with me. So I got an acoustic guitar and started going to open mics and writing songs myself and kind of doing it on my own. And through that, met some of the older guys at the open mics that played folk music. So I got more into the acoustic kind of mellow stuff. And as I got a little bit older, I started my own punk band, but I kept kind of doing singer-songwriter stuff.
What was the name of your punk band?
It was called Langley.
Langley. That doesn't sound very punkish.
It doesn't. Oh no. Well, yeah, I guess I was 18 at the time. I don't know if it was on brand for what we were doing, but yeah, I think I don't know how we came up with that name, to be honest. But yeah, it was we were just goofing off. I had like a hot pink Stratocaster that I'd run around with, and it was a lot of fun. But most of what I've done is kind of the acoustic sad sack singer-songwriter kind of stuff. Elliott Smith, Bright Eyes, those kind of vibes. But I like all kinds of music, hip hop to rock and roll to everything, blues.
What's the one thing that people don't know about you that would flip people's minds, or just be like, what? He does that? Or he likes that? He can do that? Like a hidden talent, or just a guilty pleasure, or like, do you ride a unicycle and juggle? That's pretty.
I wish I could. What's one thing that people don't know about me? I don't know if people know. I mean, the people that listen to the podcast probably don't know what I do for a living, which is I work with congregations with the interfaith organization. I'm a community organizer, and we work on a whole different, all kinds of issues here in Volusia County, Florida. Youth criminal justice, trying to get second chance for youth that make mistakes rather than a lifelong arrest record. Getting more affordable housing for working families. So that's my day job, which takes up a lot of time. So it was funny when Matt's daughter called my work and was talking with my boss about, Freddie's been doing this podcast about my dad's murder, trying to solve it. And we were talking afterwards, like Freddie, like after a 40-hour work week, goes home and tries to solve a murder. Like, what is the punishment for that? I'm, going to get demoted or something. But yeah, that's my day job. So probably a lot of people don't know about that.
If you could sit down and have dinner with two people, any two people on planet Earth, dead or alive,
So
who would they be?
Okay. That's great. Jesus, probably. I'll do Jesus and Buddha. I feel like that would be that'd be an interesting conversation,
Yes, it would be. Would you drink the wine? Would there be wine? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think Buddha would. I don't think Buddha would partake, but I think there would definitely be wine. Even if there was water, there would be wine.
All right, I think that's it. Tell the folks how they can listen to your podcast, and if they want to go and help. I think it's not a sign of attention, but put pressure. Keep this to the forefront of the Attorney General. How can they do that?
Thank you for bringing that up. So you can listen to the podcast. It's called Unforgotten, the Unsolved Murder of Matt Stewart. Wherever you listen to podcasts, there's going to be a link on the website to that app. So you can go to unforgottenpodcast.com. And if you want to reach out to the Attorney General, you can go to ncdoj.gov/contact and reach out to Attorney General Stein and ask him to look into this now over a decade old unsolved murder. And if you want to help get the word out there about the podcast, I have compiled a summary of all of the information, all the basic information on Matt's case, along with links to news articles and official documents and everything I could find basically all in one place. And I did that so that when I'm reaching out to whether it's Nancy Grace or Investigation Discovery or whoever, they can have one place where they can find everything. So if you want to help, it would mean a lot if you listen to true crime or someone listens to true crime, whatever show that is or commentator that is, send them an email with the summary, and you can get the summary at whokilledmattstewart.com.
Awesome. So and I'll put all that information too on our link.
Awesome. Yeah. So you can use that to help promote the case, and hopefully someone else will pick it up. And I will be on the sidelines cheering them on.
Well, Freddie, man, I appreciate it. Thank you for doing the original podcast. Thanks for coming back on here and kind of going over some Q&A and stuff like that. And also keep pressing forward. And if you find any new information, I know you'll let us all know.
You'll be my first call. And thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Anytime, Freddie. All right, buddy. Take care, buddy. We'll see you again soon.
All right. We'll see you guys.